Hi, welcome to the How Do I video series on Microsoft Dynamics NAV 2015. My name is Mark Brummel and I'm an MVP for Microsoft Dynamics NAV. I will be presenting how do I implement the standard journal pattern in Microsoft Dynamics NAV 2015. This video is made in collaboration with Plataan, a Microsoft Dynamics Learning Center from Belgium, and Microsoft. At the end of this video, you will have an idea on how to implement the standard journal pattern in Microsoft Dynamics NAV 2015. The objective of this video is to first look at the design pattern from the standard application, and then how to implement the pattern yourself. But first let me explain design patterns briefly. Design patterns are common solutions or best practices to solve problems. This is a well-known concept in computer programming and can therefore be applied to Dynamics NAV as well. This video is part of a series around design patterns in Dynamics NAV, and during this video I will reference to other patterns and videos. In this video we will be going through 3 easy steps. The first step, meet the pattern, is looking at the standard journal and how it works in the standard application. In step 2, know the pattern, we will go under the bonnet and see how it's implemented from a programming perspective. In step 3, use the pattern, we will use the pattern in our own example application. Before we dive into programming, let's have a look at how the pattern works from a functional perspective. The standard journal is a design pattern that is linked closely to the architectural pattern journal template batch line. Therefore, for this video I would like to reference other How Do I videos. How do I use the journal template batch line pattern? How do I read and understand posting routines? And how do I implement the ledger entry pattern? In a general journal, users can make ad hoc financial entries in the system. If the journal data can be reused later, the user has the possibility to save the current temporary transaction details. One example can be the case of monthly electricity payments. The user will manually enter the details for the first payment of the current month. Next month a part of the data will be the same, such as the vendor and the transaction details. If the user has saved the additional monthly payment as a standard journal, then they can now reuse it to create the draft for the next monthly payment. Once the draft journals are created, they can be updated with the current month information. When a journal is created, the user can invoke the Save as Standard Journal action. When saving the journal as a standard journal, the user is required to choose a code, a description, and we have the option of saving the amounts or not. The journal lines are saved in a separate table. There can only be one journal saved per journal type and code. Later the user can create new journal lines by using the Get Standard Journals action. This action restores the lines from the saved journal to the new journal lines. The data entered by the user through the journal page is stored temporarily in the journal line table. The data is available for editing or deleting. The journal line data will be stored in this table until it's either deleted or posted. Let's have a look at how this works from a technical perspective. To implement the pattern, we require 5 steps. The first step is to add the tables. For the general journal and the item journal, Microsoft have provided this feature. Each journal has 2 tables. One that stores the code and one that holds the data. The standard journal line table is a clone of the journal line table. Notice that the field numbers are identical. This is because we use transfer fields. Also notice that a lot of the AL code coexists in both tables. Try to avoid code cloning in your application by creating function libraries. Remember, code cloning is not a good practice, even though it is applied in the standard application. The next step is to provide pages for the tables. Each standard journal has 3 pages. There is a lookup page of the type list. There is the journal page of the type list plus. And we have the journal lines of the type list part. The pages are quite simple in their design. Please note that the general journal is of the type worksheet and the standard journals are of the types list part and list plus. To save the standard journal, we use a report object. This is a processing only report with a request page. The request page is the only reason why this is implemented in a report instead of a code unit. Here we can also see that the code uses the transfer fields pattern. To use the standard journal, there is a function in the journal table. In the function copy gen journal from standard journal, the code is copied from the standard journal to the general journal. This code also uses the transfer field pattern. The last step is to add 2 actions to your journal. In the general journal page, we have 2 functions: get standard journals and save as standard journal. Both functions are programmed on the page instead of the table. Let's see how we can implement the pattern in our own application. The first step will be to create the 2 tables. The standard example journals we will create by cloning the standard general journal table. We simply save the table, assign a new number, change the name, and force the changes to the database. When this is done, we change the caption, and the rest we just leave as it is right now. The standard example journal line table will be a clone of the example journal line. Again, we just save as the new number, we pick the right name, and we force the changes to the database. Now we change the caption of the table, and we change field number 23 from general journal batch name to standard journal code. And we change the table relation to match the correct table. Now we have the 2 tables we need to implement the pattern for our example database. The next step would be to create the pages. The first page is the list page with the standard example journals. Like with the table, we clone the standard Microsoft Dynamics NAV page, give it a number, and make the name unique. The next step is to update the caption and update the source table. With this page created, we can go back to the table and change the lookup page ID. The next page is the standard example journal page. This is a list plus page with no actions. We will also create that page by making a copy of the standard Microsoft Dynamics NAV page. We change the source table, we change the caption, and we save the object. Now we can go to the list page we just created for the journals, and on this page we have a page action that shows the journal. Here the page is shown, and we will change the variables, and we will find and replace and save the data. The last step is to create the journal lines. We will also create a copy of the standard subpage. Give it a unique number and give it the right source table. Now we will run into the issue that in our example journal line we do not have the same fields as in the general journal line, so we have to clean up the fields that don't exist. After we have cleaned up the page, we can save it, and now we can go to our journal and change the subpart, change the name, and now we have the pages we need to run a standard example journal. The third step is to create a report. We will also clone the report from standard Microsoft Dynamics NAV. Change the number and the name, and then go through all the variables and make sure everything is changed. Then, after we changed all the naming, we just run the find and replace again. And then after we have run find and replace and compile, we will get error messages on fields we don't have, which we then just delete. And now if we save and compile the object, we don't get any error messages anymore. With the report we just created, we have also created the save transaction. The only transaction that remains is the use transaction. Since we cloned the standard example journal table from the standard general journal table, we already have the use function in the table. We just have to change the variables. Let's do that. If we open the table and go to the code, we see that we have the functions create general journal line from standard journal line, initialize, and copy general journal line from standard journal. All we have to do is make sure that instead of using the general journal, we use our example journal. Let's go and find and replace the variables. After changing the variable names, we run find and replace again. After finding and replacing the variables, if we compile, we get the error messages on the fields we don't have, so we can delete that code. And now, after we have cleaned up the function, we can save the table, and we now have a function to use the standard example journal as an example journal. The last step to complete this example is to add the actions to our example journal. We will also copy the actions from the general journal to our own journal. We simply design the general journal, go to the page actions. We copy the functions we want to copy, but we also copy the function action. We go to the example journal and we simply paste the actions and delete the lines we don't want to have. Now we have the get standard journals and save as standard journal. But if we compile, we get unknown variables. So the next step is to copy and paste some variables from the general journal to our example journal. After copying the variables, we can go to the code and we now find and replace the general variables with the example variables. After we have replaced the variables, we can save our journal, and we have successfully implemented standard journals in our example application. Let's see how it works. Let's go to our example application and open the example journals. We will create some new lines with a quantity and an amount. And now we will run the function save as standard journal. We will give it a code and a description, and we will not save the amounts. Now we just delete the rows and use the function get standard journals and select how do I. The system says that the example journal lines have been successfully inserted, and we can see that the quantities have been saved and the amounts have been blanked out, as we selected when saving the standard journal. In this video we have not only learned how to use the standard journal pattern, we have also witnessed the power of using design patterns, allowing us to easily implement enhancements to our own application. Thanks for watching. I'm looking forward to seeing you again in another episode of the How Do I video series for design patterns on Microsoft Dynamics NAV 2015.